Today we're looking at the Sun through all 12 signs and houses. If you saw last week's episode, you'll know that the Sun represents your core identity, sense of purpose, and who you want to be when you grow up. But the Sun doesn't show up the same way for everyone. The sign tells us what sort of Sun we're dealing with. The house tells us where all that confidence, purpose, and occasional self-importance actually turns up. So let's see what happens when the brightest thing in the solar system gets handed 12 very different personalities and 12 very different places to stand. Kicking off with Aries, where the Sun is exalted. This is where the centre of identity has had 3 coffees and decided waiting is for other people. Here the Sun expresses itself through the sign of courage and discovering who you are by trying it first and apologising later. If you've got the Sun in Aries, you may find yourself by taking action and trusting your instincts. At its best, this is bold and inspiring, with a natural ability to get the ball rolling. But it can become impatient, or so determined to lead that it forgets to check whether anyone else is actually following.
Don't wait for permission, brother. The sunrise never asks. Permission? What does that mean?
The Sun in Taurus is where the centre of identity has found a comfortable chair and a mug of cocoa. Here the Sun expresses itself through the sign of stability and patience. If you've got the Sun in Taurus, you may find yourself through creating security and appreciating beauty. At its best, this is dependable, grounded, and quietly confident. But it can also become stubborn, resistant to change, or so attached to what's familiar that it mistakes comfort for growth.
Take your time, brother. Even the sunrise doesn't happen all at once. What's that? Sorry, I was eating a sandwich.
The Sun in Gemini is where the centre of identity is giving a TED talk. Here the Sun expresses itself through the sign of words, questions, curiosity, and changing the subject because it was bored. If you've got the Sun in Gemini, you may find yourself through learning, talking, writing, making connections between things, and talking. At its best, this is clever, lively and adaptable, with a real gift for keeping life moving. But when it's running loose, it can become restless, or so busy thinking about who you are that you forget what you're doing.
Just be yourself, brothers.
Sorry, you're gonna have to narrow it down a bit.
The Sun in Cancer is where the centre of identity has put the kettle on and wants to know whether you've eaten. Here the Sun expresses itself through the sign of care, belonging, and the quiet strength of protecting what matters most. If you've got the Sun in Cancer, you may find yourself through family, close friendships, and creating a place where people feel safe enough to be themselves. At its best, this is compassionate, intuitive, and deeply loyal, with a remarkable ability to nurture both people and ideas. But it can become overprotective, overly sensitive, or so busy looking after everyone that it forgets to look after itself.
Don't hide your light under a shell, man.
I've made you a pie. That's about as vulnerable as I'm getting. The Sun in Leo is where the centre of identity has finally found the keys to his own home. Here the Sun expresses itself through the sign of confidence and the desire to shine as the most authentic version of yourself. If you've got the Sun in Leo, you may find yourself through self-expression, generosity, and the example you set for other people. At its best, this is warm-hearted and naturally uplifting, with a knack for making life feel brighter wherever you go. But it can also become prideful, dramatic, or so determined to be the star of the show that it forgets everyone else has speaking parts too.
It's good to be home, brother. Welcome back. I had the place redecorated.
The Sun in Virgo is where the centre of identity has found a few things that could be improved. Here the Sun expresses itself through the sign of skill, service, and the quiet satisfaction of getting things right. If you've got the Sun in Virgo, you may find yourself through learning, solving problems, and leaving things better than you found them. At its best, this is thoughtful, capable, and remarkably dependable. But too much can become overly critical, anxious, or so busy chasing perfection that it doesn't appreciate how far it's already come.
Perfection isn't the goal, man. Growth is.
I know, but while we're here, your crown is slightly crooked.
The Sun falls in Libra. This is where the centre of identity keeps asking if everyone's happy before deciding what it wants for dinner. Here the Sun expresses itself through the sign of partnerships and the desire to create balance wherever it goes. If you've got the Sun in Libra, you may find yourself through relationships, cooperation, and bringing people together. At its best, this is diplomatic, charming and fair-minded, but it can also become indecisive, overly accommodating, or so concerned with keeping the peace that it forgets it was allowed an opinion in the first place.
You don't have to make everyone happy, brother.
Maybe. Do you mind if we take a vote? The Sun in Scorpio is where the centre of identity has been given a locked diary, a suspicious stare, and absolutely no interest in small talk. Here the Sun expresses itself through the sign of depth, intensity, and unsettling looks. If you've got the Sun in Scorpio, you may find yourself through truth, emotional honesty, and the ability to survive things that would make other people need a lie down. At its best, this is powerful and deeply perceptive, but it can also become guarded, suspicious, or so determined to stay in control that even your vulnerability has a password.
Step into the light, man. I beg your pardon. Have you met me?
The Sun in Sagittarius is where the centre of identity has packed a rucksack, booked a one-way ticket, and somehow turned a trip to the supermarket into a philosophical journey. Here the Sun expresses itself through the sign of adventure and the search for meaning. If you've got the Sun in Sagittarius, you may find yourself through travel, learning and teaching. At its best, this is optimistic, open-minded and genuinely inspiring, with a knack for helping people see the bigger picture. But when it's running loose, it can become restless, tactless, or so convinced it's found the truth it starts a religion.
Keep following the horizon, man.
I'm trying, but every time I get there it moves.
The Sun in Capricorn is where the centre of identity has a 5-year plan, and probably started it 3 years ago. Here the Sun expresses itself through the sign of ambition, discipline, and the quiet determination to build. If you've got the Sun in Capricorn, you may find yourself through responsibility, perseverance, and discovering that real confidence often comes from keeping the promises you make to yourself. At its best, this is dependable, resilient, and quietly authoritative, but it can become overly serious, emotionally reserved, or so focused on reaching the top of the mountain that it ignores the view.
The summit isn't just a destination, brother. It's proof of who you've become.
Excellent. So where's the next mountain?
In Aquarius, the Sun is in detriment, where the focus shifts from the individual to the collective. This is where the centre of identity has taken itself apart, just to see if there was a better design. If you've got the Sun in Aquarius, you may find yourself through new ideas, friendships, and questioning rules that no one can remember the reason for anymore. At its best, this is inventive, open-minded, and genuinely humanitarian, but it can become detached, contrary, or so determined to be different that it forgets there's no prize for being the weirdest person in the room.
Let your light shine, brother.
I'm trying, but yours keeps getting in the way.
The Sun in Pisces is where the centre of identity has wandered into a dream and doesn't want to wake up. Here the Sun expresses itself through the sign of imagination, compassion, and the ability to see beyond what the eyes alone can perceive. If you've got the Sun in Pisces, you may find yourself through creativity, spirituality, kindness, and those quiet moments where life suddenly feels connected in ways that are difficult to explain. At its best, this is gentle, intuitive, and deeply empathetic, but it can become escapist, overwhelmed, or so busy becoming everything to everyone else that it forgets who it was in the first place.
Follow your heart, man.
Okay, I think it swam off with the dolphins.
The first house is the front door of the chart, your presence, first impression, and the version of you that arrives before the explanation does. With the Sun here, identity tends to be very visible. You may come across as confident, distinctive, or difficult to ignore, even when you're only trying to buy milk. This can become self-centered, overly focused on image, or convinced that every room has been waiting for your entrance. But at its best, this is self-assurance, vitality, and the ability to lead just by turning up.
Stand where life can see you, then have the courage to become who you are.
Now let's put the Sun in the second house. This is the house of money, possessions, personal values, and that drawer full of cables you're definitely going to need one day. With the Sun here, identity tends to develop through building security, discovering what you truly value, and creating something in the world that feels genuinely yours. This can become overly attached to status, possessions, or measuring your worth by what's in your bank account. But at its best, this is confidence built on solid foundations, a healthy sense of self-worth, and the ability to create lasting value for both yourself and the people around you.
Know your worth, man, and don't ever sell yourself short.
Now let's put the sun in the third house. This is the house of communication, learning, community, and that one person who always starts a conversation just as you're trying to leave. With the sun here, identity tends to develop through sharing ideas, asking questions, and making sense of the world one conversation at a time. This can become opinionated, scattered, or so busy explaining everything that it forgets to listen. But at its best, this is curiosity, clear communication, and the ability to inspire other people simply by sharing what you know.
Every conversation is a chance to shine, Seeker.
Now let's put the sun in the fourth house. This is the house of home, family, and the part of you that still remembers the smell of your childhood. With the sun here, identity tends to develop through belonging, emotional security, and creating a place where you can truly be yourself when nobody else is watching. This can become overly private, overly protective, or so attached to the past that it ignores the present. But at its best, this is a deep sense of inner stability, loyalty to the people you love, and the ability to become a source of warmth and strength for those around you.
Carry your light with you, my friend, then everywhere becomes home.
Now let's put the sun in the fifth house. This is the house of creativity, romance, children and hobbies. The sun is particularly comfortable here, where identity tends to develop through self-expression, play, and the simple joy of creating something that didn't exist before. This can become attention-seeking, dramatic, or dependent on praise, but at its best this is confident, generous, and the joy of sharing what brings you joy.
Joy grows brighter when you give it away.
Now let's put the sun in the sixth house. This is the house of work, health, daily routines, and all the little jobs that somehow keep the rest of your life from falling to pieces. With the sun here, identity tends to develop through service, self-improvement, and the quiet satisfaction of becoming really good at something useful. This can become overly critical, perfectionist, or so busy fixing everyone else's problems that it forgets to clock off. But at its best, this is competence, reliability, and the ability to make an extraordinary difference through ordinary acts performed consistently.
Take care of the little things, my friend. They become the big things.
If the first house is who am I, the seventh house is who am I when I'm with you. This is the house of partnerships, marriage, close relationships, and the people who sometimes end up teaching you things about yourself that you'd rather not hear. With the sun here, identity tends to develop through cooperation, commitment, and discovering who you are by sharing your life with someone else. This can become overly dependent on approval or lose itself in relationships, but at its best, this is loyalty, mutual respect, and the ability to help people shine a little brighter together than they ever could alone.
The brightest partnerships don't steal your light, they reflect it.
Now let's put the sun in the eighth house. This is the house of intimacy, trust, loss, and all the subjects people suddenly stop talking about when their mum walks into the room. With the sun here, identity may develop through deep bonds, private truths, and experiences that change you from the inside out. This can become guarded, intense, or drawn to emotional situations that feel slightly too important to be healthy. But at its best, this is honesty, deep self-knowledge, and the ability to become more fully yourself by facing the things other people would rather leave locked in a cellar.
Shine where it's dark enough to matter, man.
Now let's put the sun in the ninth house. This is the house of higher learning, long journeys, and asking questions that don't have the decency to come with simple answers. With the sun here, identity tends to develop through exploration and the lifelong search for meaning. This can become self-righteous, dogmatic, or so busy searching for the truth that it forgets to enjoy the mystery. But at its best, this is wisdom, open-mindedness, and the ability to share what you've discovered along the way.
Never stop learning, my friend. Every sunrise has something to teach you.
Now let's put the sun in the 10th house. This is the house of career, reputation, achievement, and the things you write in your resume. With the sun here, identity tends to develop through purpose, responsibility, and building a life that leaves its mark on the world. This can become overly ambitious or overly concerned with status and job titles, but at its best this is leadership, integrity, and the ability to inspire confidence in others.
Don't chase recognition, my friend. Become the kind of person it naturally follows.
Now let's put the Sun in the 11th house. This is the house of friendships, communities, and finding people who share your weird hobbies. With the Sun here, identity tends to develop through shared goals, meaningful friendships, and contributing something worthwhile to the wider world. This can become overly idealistic, or so focused on changing the world that it forgets about the people living in it. But at its best, this is generosity, vision, and the ability to bring people together around ideas that make life better.
Find the people who help your light grow, then help theirs grow too.
Finally, let's put the Sun in the 12th house. This is the house of the unconscious, dreams, and the bits we keep behind the curtain. With the Sun here, identity tends to develop through reflection and learning that not every journey happens where other people can see it. This can become withdrawn, self-sacrificing, or so lost in fantasy that everyday life starts feeling like an optional extra. But at its best, this is quiet wisdom, deep empathy, and the ability to find strength in stillness rather than applause.
Close your eyes, my friend. Sometimes the light can only be seen from within.
And there we have the Sun through all 12 signs and houses. Hopefully that sheds some light on your karaoke addiction. Join us next week when we'll be taking a deep dive into Venus, planet of love, beauty, and impossibly expensive taste. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time.